Hi everyone, welcome to a new tutorial by Prof. Bruce. This one's about how light rail and a new downtown arena for the Ottawa Senators will impact Ottawa real estate. So how do you turn a rich dad into a poor dad? Not a poor dad into a rich dad, but a rich dad into a poor dad. Well, the punchline, as you can imagine, is you buy an NHL team. Now, how did I get involved in NHL hockey? Well, I asked myself a question: what does Toronto have that Ottawa doesn't have? And the answer was they had a team called the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we came up with a simple plan, not a complicated plan, but a simple plan to buy 600 acres of land on a major highway in Ottawa, of which we needed 100 acres to use for the building of our building and 500 acres of extra. So we would put an NHL expansion team, an NHL arena in the middle of this 600-acre piece of property. We would drive the value of the balance of the property up an extra 500 acres and sell that off, keep the 100 acres for what would become Canadian Tire Centre, where the Ottawa Senators play, and use the additional money that we got, put it in armored cars, run it down to the NHL offices in New York City on Park Avenue, give it to the NHL, and in return get an 8.5 by 11-inch piece of paper that says the NHL is pleased and proud to announce that the Ottawa Senators have been granted conditional membership in the NHL. So what do the initials NCC stand for? Well, for people here in Ottawa, they would know it stands for National Capital Commission. But in actual fact, I think it stands for the No Commitment Club, and I'll tell you why. Back in the day, so that would be in the early 1990s, I asked the NCC for permission to build the building downtown on LeBreton Flats. And I met with Mrs. Jean Pickett. She was chair of the NCC at the time, and I asked her, and she said, Bruce, do you want the private answer or do you want the public answer? And I said, Jean, are they different? She said, yes, they are. And I said, how are they different? And she says, well, uh, the private answer is no. We have a 150-year plan for the National Capital Commission to develop those lands, maybe for a new Supreme Court of Canada building, possibly for some museums. And Bruce, you're going to build a rink, maybe even a very nice rink, but from our point of view, what you're going to do is just build a rink. That's not a national use. So the answer is no. What's the public answer, Jean? And she said, well, Bruce, the NCC doesn't like to say no to Canadians. So what we say instead is we'll study it until one of two things happens. Either you give up and go away or you die, whichever comes first. Well, after that, it was obvious we had to build our building in Kanata, which is in the west end of Ottawa. So the NCC has been doing things like building museums. This is the Canadian War Museum on LeBreton Flats, but not that much else has happened on the flats. We'll talk more about that soon. One of the other reasons why Canadian Tire Centre is in Kanata, which is a western suburb of Ottawa, is that we have no light rail, no subways in Ottawa. We have OC Transpo, which is a fabulous organization, but it can only move 2,500 people per hour. If you compare that to, say, this is the Montreal Metro, which can move, I think, about 20,000 people per hour. Or you look at some of the other subways that you have around the world, and we'll see a picture here in a minute, which will show us, I think it's going to be Toronto next. And I think Toronto can move about 30,000 people an hour, so quite a bit more than Montreal. But again, whether it's Montreal or Toronto, a great deal more than, for example, OC Transpo with buses, 2,500 people per hour on Scott Street or Bank Street. Even Edmonton is ahead of Ottawa, and many people wouldn't think that, but it's true. Edmonton's a wonderful city. They have light rail. They're going to expand it. You know, Edmonton, like Ottawa, is a cold weather city, so having light rail, having a place where you can get out of the weather is pretty important. And not that long ago, I taught in Stockholm, and they have a fantastic subway. It's just an amazing thing. You'd never think of taking your car anywhere. It's quite deep. It was buried about 20 meters below the surface, and I think that was because they were afraid of a nuclear holocaust back in the 60s when they started this system. But Stockholm is bigger than Ottawa, about 1.7 million people. Ottawa's, Gatineau's about 1.3, but not that much bigger. And so Ottawa will, hopefully in the next year or two, have a small starting point, a part of our community that will be a very important way of getting us to the next level into a G8 nation, a true G8 capital, which will have its own light rail system, Ottawa Light Rail. So what is the proper role of government? In my opinion, government really has four main roles: the defense of the nation and the state, the protection of human and property rights, providing equality of opportunity, not equality of outcomes, but equality of opportunity, and enforcing the rule of law and contract law. It's a very important role, but they should leave the doing to the private sector. And I'm going to show you an example of why I believe that governments should stick to what they are naturally inclined to do and what they're good at and what's very important for them to do, and leave the doing to the private sector. Here's an example. This is the Civic Center where the Sens played their first 3.5 years before moving to Canadian Tire Center, which was called the Palladium. And you can see on the right-hand side, it's kind of a weirdly truncated arena. On the left-hand side, it's got a full bowl. And at the end, you can see the start of a ring of suites, private suites that sit anywhere from 8 to 12 people. And the City of Ottawa came to us. It's their building. They said, look, you're going to start play here. That was in October of 1992. We can build suites for you. And I said, that's great. So can you give us a proposal? And they did. They came back. They could build 16 suites in their building for $12 million. That would be $750,000 each. Wow, I said, that seems a little expensive. Do you mind if we have a look at it? So the Sens, with their contractor, PCL, which is a well-known international contractor, came up with a price of 42 suites, including full fit-up and furniture fit-up and equipment, FF&E, for $2.9 million, or $69,000 per suite. 11 times higher. That's what the city estimate was. It was 11 times higher. Think about that, how much more efficient the private sector can be. In the case of the Ottawa Senators, they now have some buildings like the Sensplex, the Bell Sensplex out in Kanata, which is a 4 ice surface arena, and it has field turf. They do about $650,000 a year in sponsorship and naming rights. An average City of Ottawa run arena is less than $10,000, a difference of 65. So I think government should leave the doing to the private sector and stick to what they do best. So how's the NCC done? Well, not particularly well. They have built one museum, which was the War Museum, and then there are a few condo towers. They're kind of lonely. They sit there. They're having a hard time holding up in the property market, and they're really creating another urban no place. So the NCC has recently come to the view they've had a change of heart from 25 years ago. They've reached out to the private sector and they've asked for proposals. They got two proposals, one from the Sens and one from another group that wasn't successful. And it looks like the NCC will go forward with the Sens proposal, which you can see here on the screen. This is a view from downtown Ottawa looking west. You can see the Ottawa River on the right-hand side, and you can see this new development, which will be called Rendezvous LeBreton. And you can also see that it's quite an intense development. So it has lots of residential uses and other uses. And here, I apologize for all the numbers on this slide, but here you can see the proposal: 4,400 new residential units, 800 hotel rooms, a new 18,000 seat arena to replace Canadian Tire Center, 12,000 jobs. So very much a mixed use community and quite intense and dense. And I tried to figure out how much the Sens could afford to pay for this site. And this is just me talking in my own sort of calculation. But if they paid $100 per month per condo unit, so out of, say, you bought a condo there, and out of $400 a month in condo fees, $100 went to the NCC for land rent, and $2 per square foot went into your operating costs in commercial space for the NCC's land rent. That would produce a total of almost $9.7 million a year in land rent for the NCC, which would be quite an amazing amount for the next 50 years or 60 years or even longer. And if you capitalize it at 5%, that's worth almost $200 million to the NCC. And then when I work backwards to per square foot, it worked out to about $83 per square foot, which is about right for downtown Ottawa property like this. So I think you've got a sense of what the NCC could do. They could get land rent for a period of time. It's still on the site after the lease is over. The Sens get essentially a free site, and I think that's where they're going. Here again is the plan for Rendezvous LeBreton. And in this slide, you can see that there's an aqueduct. A lot of people don't know that Ottawa has a fabulous aqueduct. But the important thing to see in this slide is the fact that you can see that the light rail system, the lower left-hand side, is going to be buried under this plan so that it connects both the north and south sides of this community. This is not a new idea. This is the Hudson Yards in New York City, the largest real estate project, I think, ever in the United States. And they're burying the Hudson train yards, and they're going to build an incredible, really, city above it. And the only reason that you can do these things now is that the rent gradient in places like New York City are so high that it justifies creating, in effect, new land by building a platform over a rail yard. Now, the Sens were up against a competing bid, and they had some interesting things in their bid. They were going to build, for example, a new Ripley's. But, you know, those are the kinds of things that maybe you go to once in a lifetime. You know, I have 5 kids and 2 grandchildren, and maybe we'd go, you know, once in a lifetime. The other things, though, about LeBreton and Rendezvous LeBreton was that it had more legs. In this slide, you can see the War Museum on the lower left-hand side, LeBreton Flats beside it. And then on the old Domtar lands, right in the middle of the Ottawa River between Ontario and Quebec, is Zibi. Zibi is a new development that is being pioneered by Jonathan Westeinde. You can see him here. He's the young genius behind Windmill Developments and Zibi. So between Rendezvous LeBreton and Zibi and some of the things being done in Ottawa Centre and in the Byward Market, you'll have a whole new eco-district, and it will put Ottawa on the map. It'll help with our branding and will help us keep our young people at home. It's kind of Ottawa's answer to Toronto's distillery district, and maybe in a way Ottawa's answer also to Granville Island, except Granville Island doesn't have much of a residential component. Ottawa's you know, new eco-district will have significant residential component. So how many bad decisions can one city make? Apparently, quite a few. We got rid of streetcars. When I was a kid, 9 years of age, I could pay a nickel and get on a streetcar and be all over this town. What we did was we replaced those fantastic streetcars with noisy, dirty, smelly diesel buses, which nobody likes. And then, as you know, the NCC expropriated LeBreton Flats and replaced it with nothing for 50 years. And then finally started to do something with it, but really was creating another no place. And then the city of Ottawa had this great idea, let's put light rail in, which is a good idea. And we signed a binding agreement with 2 very responsible companies to build light rail to the south. And then the city of Ottawa reneged on that contract, damaging our international reputation. And the city got a lawsuit from Siemens and PCL. So the city spent $80 million on the right-of-way, reneged on a signed binding agreement with Siemens and PCL, forgone. Anyway, we didn't get $900 million of senior government financing for light rail. And there were about $2 billion worth of real estate projects by clients of mine and people I know that were lined up to go at those stations all the way down to Barhaven and Riverside South in the south end of Ottawa. And of course, those new apartments, and new hotels, new commercial space did not go ahead. Then the province of Ontario amalgamated 12 local governments into one, and the idea was to save about 4,500 employees and reduce the head count to about 8,500 FTEs, full-time equivalents, which you and I would call jobs. But instead, the City of Ottawa headcount has exploded to over 16,500, costing Ottawa ratepayers over $800 million a year extra. It's an incredible number. Calgary somehow gets by with about 9 or 10,000 jobs or civil servants, and Ottawa needs somehow 16,500, and those two cities are comparable in size. So we have a huge bureaucracy that delays everything. And I thought this would have been impossible, but residential property taxes in Ottawa are higher than Metro Toronto. And Toronto's a much bigger city, about 5.5 million people, much more difficult to govern. And you would have thought, when you look at the tax base and tax rates, that Toronto would be much higher, but it's in fact the other way around. And of course, the Civic Center, the downtown arena, was obsolescent on the day it was open because of what I call a lobotomy. Half the side was taken off so they could save $1 million. And we have these things in Ottawa called parkways. And these parkways actually come between, they're just highways, come between where people live and 3 rivers and waterways. Gatineau River, Ottawa River, Rideau River. And even if you got there, there are no washrooms there. There's no place to change. There's no place to get a hot dog or tea or coffee. And, when you have parks that have no active uses in them, they don't get used. The only thing that you see down there is nothing. So what could you do to activate those parks? You could go back into them, and we used to have it in Ottawa. You could have change rooms, you could have beaches, you could have canoes and kayaks, because we have these incredible rivers, and we have a beautiful canal. Many of you know, of course, about the Rideau Canal. It's a World Heritage Site. So there's a lot that we could do, but in fact, we've been making our parks sterile. So parks are dangerous and abandoned places. If you've ever been to Bayview Yards where the O train goes, you'll know what I'm talking about. And for some reason, we've allowed urban planners to take over urban design, but they really don't know much about design. They certainly don't know much about architecture, creating pleasing streetscapes, mixed use, and the approved architecture in Ottawa is universally horrible. And suburbs, you would think you would know how to design a good suburb today in 2016, but they are wastelands, no stores, every trip is a car trip. It's amazing. One of my clients runs a national pub chain, and he came to Ottawa and he wanted to go and put a pub in Barrhaven. I said, let's get in my car and let's go see Barrhaven. So we did. And when you go through Barrhaven, we're still building suburbs today in 2016 that will have 3,000 houses in a row and no place to put a pub, a corner store. There's no place for your child to walk to and get a liter of milk or a popsicle. And we never actually found a location where he could put his pub, one of his neighborhood pubs. So how should we be designing communities? How should we build better cities and towns? And what do millennials want? Because if we can't keep our young people in places like Ottawa, which is basically a small town, if they have to move to Toronto or LA or Shanghai to do great things, our community is doomed. So what do millennials really want? They want live, work, play, learn, teach, shop, make, trade, entertain, walkable tech communities. There'll be a test on that afterwards, so hopefully you've memorized that by now. So what do they want? They want a place where they can go for a pre-drink, and then they want to be able to walk somewhere, right? They want walkable communities. Go to an arena, downtown arena, cheer on the Ottawa Senators. And if they can't walk, they want to be able to call up a driverless car using a modern app. In this case, I think I'm showing Uber. And here's something that I was flabbergasted. While Ottawa and Toronto were approving Uber, Mississauga Council decided to ban it. Now, how long did that ban last? Not very long. It's kind of like asking the tide not to come in. And so finally, Mississauga Council, after a few weeks, it wasn't very long, caved in to Uber, because young people want a community that's tech friendly and a community that will be changeable to something that they feel comfortable with. So again, they want communities like this where you can walk and enjoy yourself by walking. They want to be within 1,200 meters, maybe as much as 2,000 meters, but certainly within 1,200 meters of a subway station. And they want, as you see on the left-hand side, they want an urban condition, not a rural condition. I have a subdivision for sale, or I had a subdivision for sale in Fitzroy for many years. That's a rural community about 45 minutes from downtown Ottawa. There's just no demand for rural lots. This is the most brand conscious generation ever. When I was teaching in Stockholm a few years ago, 61 out of 62 of the young people I was teaching had MacBook Pros. The Apple brand is very, very, very strong. So this community has to get on side with what millennials want, and to do that we have to make sure that we have the right brand. Millennials love brands like Airbnb. Netflix is very popular. Absolutely every one of your residential apartments have to have high-speed internet. They need Wi-Fi. And millennials don't mind living in micro-apartments, smaller spaces. That's what they want. Here's Patrick Kennedy. He's a New York architect, and he was the designer of that micro-suite I just showed you. And he's showing how a bureau is a bureau during the day, and at night you can put a, I guess, kind of a futon on it and sleep on it if you want. Everywhere we go now, all the buildings that I own, and certainly the people I coach, are replacing their halogen pot lights with LED pot lights. In my garage office, I have 4 LED pot lights that produce the equivalent of 90 watts of brightness for 7 watts of power consumption, a factor of 12. This is a no-brainer. Return on investment for something like this is a few $100. This is my friend Eric Kuhn. He's an American expatriate living in London, England. And when I went to see him a few years ago, he said to me, Bruce, did you know that leisure is the new infrastructure? And Eric is brilliant. He's like the Marshall McLuhan of the 2000 and whatevers. And so when he talks, I listen, but I can't say that I really understood what he was talking about until over the last 2 years, I kind of got the impression. Here's an experience I'm going to talk about in a minute. Young people want experiences more than they want things, and I think that's an important new change. That shot was from the Electric Daisy Carnival, which is an iconic festival held in Las Vegas every year. It's a 3-day event, and just in the last 5 years alone, it has attracted 2 million people. That's the entire population of Paris has gone to this carnival. So if you want to do something for your community, hold a street party and make it an experience, not a thing. Okay, so what millennials don't want is they don't want huge monster homes. I couldn't believe when I read that a spec home is being built in LA for $500 million. And so when I look at this home, I don't see a wonderful asset. I don't see a home. I just see a kind of an endless money pit. And LA County has about 10.5 million people living in it, and at least 5% of them look like this guy on your screen. And what that means is, you know, whoever buys that place, he's got about 500,000 people heading there to rob him or her. I just can't imagine why anyone would want to buy that. You know, at some point in your life, you find that property and the things that you own, you don't own them anymore. They start to own you and they bog you down. So I like things that produce good cap rates. I like things that produce cash flow. I do not like things like monster homes. That's how you turn, I guess, dollars into quarters. And I think actually you're not just turning dollars into quarters, you're probably turning dollars into pennies. And, you know, I said that one way to do that is to buy an NHL hockey team, another is to buy a $500 million spec home. Something else that millennials do not want is they do not want these soulless office buildings. And if you came to me and said, Bruce, I've got this great deal on an office building, I would tell you, even if they gave it to you for free, don't buy it, because I think these are dinosaurs. What the millennials want and what a lot of people are doing, myself included, is they have a home office. This is a European startup called Offices. It's kind of a bad name, but that's what they do, home offices. People want to turn their garages, like I've done, into home office. And my home office is in my garage. Tells you what my family thinks of me. Or they might turn their garage into a bakery or a micro retail store that's now legal in Ottawa. And this particular use, I think that's a pool store. So I guess in this guy's neighborhood, there's lots of pools. You can put sheds in your backyard and rent them out. We do that a lot. People need storage. You can put them in for about $2,500 and charge about $85 a month. And young people want makerspace, so put workshops in your backyard and rent them out too. Again, they want experiences, not things. So this is a backyard set up for outdoor movies. They like to play games. Don't we all? And this is Daniels Corp. I think it's the second largest condo builder in Toronto. And their slogan is love where you live, which makes a lot of sense to me. So what they do is when they finish a condo tower, they don't just walk away and say, there you go, good luck. They put the Club Med type GO, Gentil Organisateur, into their buildings, and they organize bridge night if it's an older demographic segment, and maybe beer pong if it's a bit younger. So what is Canada's national slogan? For a long time it's been peace, order, and good government. And certainly when I was a younger person, I probably preferred the American slogan, pursuit of happiness. Makes sense, I guess, if you're a young man. But as I grew older, I realized I think Canada has its priorities right. Peace, order, and good government. You cannot create any value in real estate unless you have that. There's a picture of Mike Ilitch. He's the owner of the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Tigers of Major League Baseball. And when I got to know Mike back in the day, he said, Bruce, what's the murder rate like in Ottawa? And I said, I don't know, Mike. I don't know, 10 or 12. He said, a day? No, Mike, that's a year. So this is what Detroit looks like. They have a murder rate of about 10 or 12 people a day, much higher than anything in Canada would tolerate. And this is what Ottawa looks like. That's the byward market. So you cannot create value. Even if you could buy 5,000 homes in Detroit for $1 each, you wouldn't buy them. Just to be clear, this is what Detroit looks like, and this is what Ottawa looks like. So why do I coach and teach real estate? Why am I a real estate broker? It's because 80% of Canadians and about 82% of Americans do not have a defined benefit pension plan. Basically, if you're not a government worker, you're pretty much on your own. I love this ad. This is a bank that's proudly advertising that they are offering 0.99% interest. If you wanted to have an $80,000 a year income when you retire, how much money would you have to save in order to have that income at 0.99%? The answer is over $8 million in savings. What is the Canada pension plan paying out today? The average CPP payout in 2015 was $550 a month, which means that about half of Canadians are below $550. It's very difficult to live on that kind of money. So over the next 25 years or so, you're going to see a lot of this. You're going to see tremendous number of elders who are homeless. This poor lady is 97 and homeless, and she's obviously asking for spare change. If that's not going to be you, then you need to invest in real estate. My wife makes me keep this piece of paper in my briefcase. So next time I want to buy an NHL team or start a newspaper, start a sign company, all the different things I've done, I pull it out and I read it to myself. It's real estate stupid 3 times. So I wrote a mini book. This is a $3 mini book called Real Estate Investing Made Easy, How to Get Rich for Real. I wanted to actually call it Real Estate Investing, How to Get Rich Slow, but my publisher said if I put the word slow in a title, I'll never sell any. So it's $3 and it's about 40 or 45 pages, and it'll help you understand what it is I do. I do quite a bit of keynote speaking, basically in 2 areas. How to provide for yourself and your family by an above average performing real estate portfolio, And the other thing I talk about in most of my keynotes, or at least some of them, is how to animate your community, how to make it vibrant, how to brand it, how to keep your millennials and your young people at home. I released a book last year, the end of last year, so December of 2015, which was the 25th anniversary of the founding of the Ottawa Senators, called Don't Back Down. And it's a story, obviously, of the founding of the team, but it's also about the National Hockey League, big league sports, lots of real estate in it, and it's available for $10 from my website. So, if you're going to provide for yourself and your family through real estate investing, what are some of the things you should do? Well, I thought before I get to some of the things you should do, I'm going to deal with some of the things I don't think you should do. I don't think you should buy condos with lots of rules, like, for example, a condo that prohibits Airbnb. Definitely don't buy property that doesn't cash flow. People always go on the basis of the greater fool theory. There's somebody even more foolish than you who will pay you a higher price than you paid next year. Don't do that. Rezonings are not for the average person. It's too complicated, too lengthy, and too risky. We just don't do it anymore. And that means basically you can't do much in the way of land development or new subdivision. It's only for the big guys. I also don't like building new product. It's so expensive and so difficult to get products out of the ground now. I don't do it. Certainly, I don't like office buildings. You already know that. And definitely you don't want to enter sectors dominated by the big guys because their cost of funds is less than 1%. Yours is probably going to be much higher. And don't buy in small towns, rural areas, or outer suburbia unless it's only for cash flow, not capital appreciation. So if you bought a property for $200,000 in a rural area or small town, 10 years from now is probably worth about that. All right, so why not to build new product? Well, here's an example. This is in Kanata. It's called Park Ridge Place, built by Homestead out of Kingston. 3 new buildings. These buildings were supposed to cost $164,000 per unit's concrete construction high-rise, and in fact ended up costing $350,000 a door. Rents didn't go up. Rents are $1,600 or $1,700 a month for these 2-bedroom units, but the price more than doubled, and the rents didn't change. So what are some of the things that maybe you should be doing? Well, I like to buy urban property. So even in the United States, I would buy urban property, but I would try and buy in places that were safe, that there was peace, order, and good government. In Ottawa, we buy inside the green belt. You also have to learn how to animate your portfolio, by adding backyard sheds or garage offices or micro retail or maybe a tech package to your homes and your rentals. And programming. That's what Daniels Corp does. They get probably about a 3 to 4% premium on all their condos because they have programming. Like I said, bridge night and euchre night for elders and beer pong for the younger demographic. I like using platforms like Airbnb to boost cap rates. And renovation and property management is a core competency. Don't think that you can delegate property management and renovation to third parties and not at least have careful oversight. You absolutely need to be expert in both areas, and you have to stick with product that is fairly simple, and you avoid the big guys like the banks and the pension funds and the insurance companies with their very low cost of funds. So things like single family homes that you can renovate and rent, duplexes, triplexes, multi-res. I like mini storage. I like retail plazas, industrial condos. I still like land and lots, but only where you can sever. And obviously, the other thing you want to do is you want to make sure you get some Prof. Bruce coaching. I do coach people not only in Ottawa, but in Toronto, in the United States. I do that with Google Hangout or Skype. And what I do is I have a very simple model. It's $600 a month for Prof. Bruce coaching plus HST, which is harmonized sales tax. And I meet with my clients either in person or via Skype or Google Hangout once a month. And I also give them unlimited email support and text support. So I get asked, what's going to happen to Canadian Tire Centre? What's going to become of Kanata if the Sens move downtown to LeBreton Flats? This is Canadian Tire Centre as seen from the east looking west. And it's a building that sits in a parking lot of 7,000 plus vehicles. This is an old picture of Maple Leaf Gardens in downtown Toronto, where the Maple Leafs played for many, many decades, and of course it's been replaced by the Air Canada Centre today. So what became of Maple Leaf Gardens after the Leafs moved out? Well, it was repurposed and done beautifully, frankly. It's now a Loblaws superstore in part of the old Maple Leaf Gardens. And in the other part of it, there's the Mattamy Athletic Center, which is run by Ryerson University. So I think it's a stupendous reuse of the building, and I think Eugene Melnick and Cyril Leader, who run the Sens, can repurpose Canadian Tire Center to something, maybe 3 or 4 superstores in it, and it'll have 2 million plus visits a year. Even if the Sens move downtown, if it's just 3 or 4 superstores in the middle of a 7,000 vehicle parking lot. So I think Kanata will do just fine. I also get asked what kind of legacy projects could we build in Ottawa that would have lasting impact on the brand of the city and also on its economic future. This is again another shot of Rendezvous LeBreton. So one of the things we have here in Ottawa, which I think many people will know, is we have the longest skateway in the world. It's over 10 kilometers of skatable surface, and it's hugely popular. Several million people a year are using it. So one of the things that I propose for the city of Ottawa is to build, to go along with the longest skateway in the world, to build a boardwalk here in Ottawa to become the longest boardwalk in the world. This is, I think, the boardwalk of New Jersey, so that might be Atlantic City. I think that actually might be Atlantic City there on your screen now. And even though Atlantic City is not that successful economically, the boardwalk is. This is Highline Park in New York City. This is an old unused freeway, was never completed, and somebody had the brilliant idea of turning it into a linear park. And so it's been repurposed in the last few years, and in fact they're adding to it as we speak. Here's another shot of it. And so if you own one of these industrial buildings next to Highline Park, which sees over 2 million visits a year, your property value just went up a lot. So you could repurpose those buildings for industrial use or for commercial or residential use and expect to see real dividends from it. This is a wonderful design right next to Highline Park by an Iraqi-American architect. And as I said earlier, about $2 billion worth of real estate has been rehabilitated or brand new development next to Highline Park. So here in Ottawa, what could we do? You can't really see it that well on here, but that sort of long brown line connects the War Museum on LeBreton Flats to the Parliamentary Precinct. Then it goes north into Quebec to connect to the museum there, Museum of Civilization, and then all the way to Casino de Lac Leamy itself in Gatineau River. And then to the south it goes to the Byward Market, the University of Ottawa, and to the Rockcliffe Pavilion. This is something that we could do to rebrand Ottawa that would have a lasting impact on the city. 10 kilometers or a little bit more than 10 kilometers, a place where we could celebrate Canada. So thank you very much for listening to me and this tutorial. If you're interested in some real estate coaching or some keynote speaking, or if I can help in any other way, you can get me on Twitter at Prof. Bruce or through my alter ego at Quantum Entity. And there's my cell number, email address, my blog, and my personal website. Again, thank you so much for spending time with me. And just a reminder, what do millennials really want and how you can rebrand your community? They want live, work, play, learn, teach, shop, make, trade, entertain, walkable tech communities. That's what they want, and you want to keep your young people in your town. Whether you're a real estate investor, you're a tech employer, you're a government agency, these are the people, and they're your future. Thank you very much.